Welcome to Peninsula Backstage, the show that looks inside local live theater and talks about upcoming productions that you can go see. I'm Nina Perry, and I'm your host. The Man Who Came to Dinner is a comedy by Moss Hart and George S. Kaufman that premiered on Broadway in 1939 and has enjoyed revival productions in 1980 and 2000. Palo Alto Players is presenting The Man Who Came to Dinner at the Lucy Stern Theater in Palo Alto from June 15th through July 1st. Today on Peninsula Backstage, we'll be talking with Jim Shelby, who is playing the role of Sheridan Whiteside, and Kristen Lo, who is playing Maggie Cutler. Jim and Kristen, welcome to Peninsula Backstage.
Thanks, Nina.
Thank you for being here. I'd also like to thank our small but mighty studio audience today. Thank you for joining us. All right, so Jim and Kristen, without giving too much away, tell us about The Man Who Came to Dinner.
Oh my goodness. It's just a perfect play in the sense that it takes place in one set on the stage and in the 30s, and it's about a small town in Ohio, in this house where a gentleman named Sheridan Whiteside, the role I get to play, is a radio personality, raconteur, a very sort of self-important, almost like H.G. Wells. He knows all of these very famous people. He visits to this small house in Ohio, and having dinner, he didn't want to go there. On his way out of dinner, he slips on the front porch on a piece of ice, breaks his hip, and has to stay there for another month. And so it's the story of him turning that little house upside down. And Maggie Cutler is Sheridan Whiteside's friend and long-time secretary, long-suffering secretary, and it's also about her falling in love with somebody in the town, and he doesn't want to lose his best friend and enabler.
Okay.
Yeah. And another fun thing about the play is Sheridan Whiteside is based on a real 1930s radio personality,
yes, it
right?
is. Yep.
And then there are also characters in the play that are like Noel Coward and Groucho Marx, and a lot of these characters are based on real people, the ones that kind of come in and out of the play.
They drop like 50, 75 personalities of the time that people then would have known, and we're struggling and enjoying learning about, and the audience will hopefully come along with us as we learn with them.
Okay, okay, great. So what originally drew you to this material?
Well, I have been asking, Jim Shelby and I work at Gunn High School together, teaching theater, and I have been asking him a long time what it would take to get him back on the stage. I was actually one of his students in the 90s, and I remember going to theater work shows and seeing him on stage. And now many years later, I was like, what is it going to take to get you on stage? And then I had this idea that when I was in high school, I saw Jim Shelby's teacher, George Ward, play Sheridan Whiteside in a TheaterWorks production of The Man Who Came to Dinner. And I said,
killed. It was amazing.
Yeah, and I said, maybe it's your turn now to do this character. And Jim just lit up. And I was like, okay, I think this is the project that we're going to start structuring. And we have a lot of other teachers with some acting experience at Gunn High School, so we've filled in some of the characters with that, and then also some other community actors, and that's kind of how it started.
It's such an interesting story. It has another couple of levels. When I was in high school at Woodside High School, when I first started doing theater, my drama teacher, George Ward, directed The Man Who Came to Dinner, and I was in that play, and I played a small, fun part in that production in 1971.
Wow.
And so then I saw George Ward play Sheridan Whiteside again in TheaterWorks in the 90s, and after that, I directed the play myself at Gunn High School. So I've been in it, I've seen my drama teacher be in it, I've directed it, and now I get to play Sheridan Whiteside. So these layers upon layers. My student is now my colleague at Gunn, and we get to act with each other on stage. So it's just layers and layers and layers.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, and we're in our third day of rehearsal now, and it's already really, really fun.
Yeah.
Great.
And some of my students now are in it, playing young characters in the play. So it's like kind of overwhelming.
Yeah.
Very sweet, like too sweet.
Yeah.
So your experiences with this play date back to the 70s.
Yeah.
So what makes this play still funny? Why are folks still producing it?
Kaufman and Hart wrote a beautiful piece of theater. I mean, the wordplay is so delightful and so incisive. We won't get all the name jokes, but we'll get what they're about. And so our dramaturge is like busily letting us know who Zazu Pitts is, who is Booth Tarkington, so that our feeling about them will come across to the audience who has not heard those words before.
Right.
But maybe some of the Palo Alto Players audiences will know those names, and so it'll be really fun. You don't have to know all the players to enjoy the play.
Right, right. And as you said, your relationship to those names, your character's reactions to those names will be important, and that will convey what needs to be conveyed. Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, great. Good. So how would you characterize the tone and the rhythm of the show? I mean, it's a comedy.
Yes, our director has told us that we have to be very fast. The play has to move.
It's like a screwball comedy. Like bing, 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 bing.
Yeah, there's always somebody entering as you're leaving the stage, and like you say one word to them, and then they go off, and you're there, and then, I mean, kind of the constant is that Sheridan Whiteside is almost on stage for the entire play. You rarely get to leave the stage. I hope nobody misses an entrance for your sake.
That's right.
Leaving you alone on stage.
I asked George Ward, like, any thoughts on playing the part? And he says, make sure everybody off stage knows their cues, because if they don't come on, you're out there. It's really fun. So I'm working on the other people.
All right.
So I've got plenty to work on, let me tell you.
Very good, very good. Well, in addition to the previous productions that you have been involved with, the play was also made into a movie, released in 1942. Have you seen that movie?
Nope.
Okay.
I haven't either.
Okay. So was that a deliberate choice not to let it color your approach to the stage production? Okay.
And it sort of, I'm not sure it aged well. The play itself does age beautifully because everybody gets to move within it. So there's I think, a little bit of contemporary air about it. But again, we're harking back to this screwball comedy. I just want to say it's almost like a circus. People keep coming in. Act 2, Act 3. Great new characters keep surprising, so the energy keeps on, because he knows everybody in the world. So all these famous, unusual people keep visiting him.
Okay.
And turning, again, this small town household completely upside down.
Yeah. So it's not just the members of the household that are involved in the action.
Oh, no, 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 no. The world comes to him.
All of Sheridan Whiteside's friends want to visit him as he's in this wheelchair. And so they all come on over. Yeah.
Okay.
And there are complaints from the family that he has like taken over the whole house.
And of course, Sheridan just takes great pleasure in torturing Mr. and Mrs. Stanley, whose house they're in, like that, because he has nothing but contempt for him. He's kind of a hateful character in a way, and we still have to like him at the same time, which is a nice twist. And so he's awful. Maggie's much less awful, but she sort of understands him and takes care of him.
Okay.
We have seen what it's like to have narcissistic leaders these days, and I think there's resonances which are just hilarious in this play, and we've got to laugh.
Yep. That is true. That is true. Well, I think in a moment we should see a little bit of Sheridan Whiteside and Maggie Cutler interacting with each other. So you're going to perform a scene, and is there anything you'd like to say about this scene, like putting it in context of the rest of the story?
It takes place in the Stanley's house, and you've been asking other characters, where have I been?
That's right.
And I have been out ice skating with Bert Jefferson.
Maggie, my secretary, ice skating? What is that? But she's met this local newspaper man, and she's fallen in love. So this is where Sheridan finds out his secretary is fallen in love and is not going to be his secretary, his gopher anymore. He can't handle that. He needs stability, and he needs this person to get everything he needs done all the time, because she's great. Suddenly he's going to lose her. He can't handle that.
Okay, very good. All right, well, I will excuse you both to get set on our stage.
On the stage.
All right. And in the meantime, I have a fun fact. There's a musical adaptation of this play. It's called Sherry, S-H-E-R-R-Y, exclamation mark. And it ran briefly on Broadway in 1967. The music was by Lawrence Rosenthal, and the book and lyrics are by James Lipton of Inside the Actors Studio. A studio recording was based on the score and released in 2004 with Nathan Lane singing the role of Sheridan Whiteside. Excuse me. And now we're going to see our Sheridan Whiteside and our Maggie Cutler. Let's watch.
Good evening, Sherry. Really, Sherry, you've got this room looking like an old parrot cage. Did you nap while I was out? What's the matter, dear? Cat run away with your tongue?
Don't look at me with those big cow eyes, you sex-ridden hag. Where have you been all afternoon? Out alley-catting with Bert Jefferson?
Sherry, Bert read me his play this afternoon. It's superb. It isn't just that play written by a newspaper man. It's superb. I want you to read it tonight. It just screams out for Cornell. Will you send it to her? And will you read it tonight?
No, I will not read it tonight. And while we're on the subject of Mr. Jefferson, you might ask him if he wouldn't like to pay your salary since he's taking up all your time.
Oh, come on now, Sherry. It isn't as bad as that.
I haven't been able to reach you, not knowing what haylofts you frequent.
Stop behaving like a spoiled child, Sherry.
Don't use that patronizing tone with me, you flea-bitten Cleopatra. I am sick and tired of you sneaking out of this house like a sex-starved high school girl every time my back is turned.
Well, Sherry, I'm afraid you've hit the nail on the head.
Stop behaving like Zazu Pitts and explain yourself to me.
I'll make it quick, Sherry. I'm in love.
Nonsense. This is merely delayed puberty.
No, this is it. You are going to lose a very excellent secretary.
You're out of your mind.
Yes, I think I am a little. But I am a girl who's waited a long time for this to happen, and now it has. Mr. Jefferson doesn't know it yet, but I'm going to try my darndest to marry him.
I see. Is that all?
Yes. Well, except I suppose this what might be called my resignation, as soon as you've got someone else.
Now look here, Maggie. We've been together a long time. You are indispensable to me, but I think I'm unselfish enough not to let that stand in the way of your happiness. Because whether or not you know it, I have a great affection for you.
Yes, I know that, Sherry.
That being the case, I will not stand by and let you make a complete fool of yourself.
I'm not, Sherry.
You are, my dear. You are behaving like a Booth Tarkington heroine. I cannot believe it. I cannot believe that a girl who for the past 10 years has had the great of the world served up before her on a platter, I cannot believe that this is anything other than a kind of temporary insanity that you would fall in love in 7 days with a second-rate small-town newspaper man. I shall do everything in my power to bring you to your senses.
Now listen to me, Whiteside. I know you. Lay off. I know what a devil you can be. I've seen you do it to other people, but don't you dare do it to me. Don't drug yourself into thinking that all you're thinking about is my happiness. You're thinking about yourself a little bit too, and all those months of breaking in somebody new. I've seen you in a passion when your life has been disrupted because you couldn't dine in Calcutta on July 12th with Boo Boo. Well, that's too bad, so there it is. I'm going to marry Bert if he'll have me, and don't you dare try any of your tricks because I'm on to every one of them. That's my message to you, Big Lord Fauntleroy.
Thank you, Jim and Kristen, for giving us a sneak peek into The Man Who Came to Dinner.
You're welcome.
So at this point, I'd like to invite our studio audience members to ask any questions they might have of Jim and Kristen about the scene we just saw, or the play, or their acting techniques.
I have a question. So interesting, a thought that popped in my head was, why would she quit her job because she's getting married? And it made me think, were there any parts of this play that you changed or modernized, any words or phrases for, I mean, you want, it's placed in the 30s, so you may not, but the modern audience would maybe click more with?
There are a few lines that I'm like, maybe we should change that. Like the Noel Coward character comes in and talks about going through the countryside, like raping the daughters or something like that. And I mean, it makes you go, ugh, cringe. So, I mean, I don't know if you could say betting the daughters or something like that, but that would probably change it for the audience. So I think there's a few words, but yeah, you know, she's going to get married, so she's going to quit her job because it's 1939, of course.
There's a couple of things. When somebody rings the doorbell, he shouts out, "The Stanleys have been arrested for white slavery. Go away," like that. Oh, okay, that's interesting, right? And so line after line keep coming. At its best, it's making us look at how things evolve. And the women in this play don't come off very well. She's wonderful and intelligent, and yet she's going to meet this guy and go off and stop this incredible career because she wants to go be with Bert Jefferson. That's like we think about now. Is that possible? Or is that do we buy it? And then this other character that he brings in, that she's sort of like this femme fatale that he brings in to ruin her plans. How they treat her at the end is sort of horrific. and we have to. Can we live with this? And hopefully, we're laughing a lot, and we're going so fast we don't really think about it. You know.
No, it's important to show the history at the time. It's important.
And that's ideal. And yet, I think in live theater, instead of on a film, which is the thing about a film aging, on stage we sort of buy into it, and everybody's in the same room, we're breathing the same air, and we sort of go forward, and it's this conspiracy of let's go forward. I think it's interesting and more possible in the same room, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
We're hoping.
Great. Any other questions?
Great.
You're both instructors at a high school. I think that's fantastic. My drama teacher never performed that I saw. I can imagine that changes the teaching dynamic, right? If your students can see you or even perform with you, wow. So I can imagine that's for good or bad, right? It's probably humbling at times. Can you
100%.
describe what kind of things change when you perform and your students see them?
Do you want to start off?
It's just,
Yeah.
I know when I direct, I become, when I'm acting, it'll help improve my direction. And when I'm directing, it helps improve my acting. So that's it's nice. It's so great to have kids, and they see you put your money where your mouth is, you know, and be humble and mortal and do your best. And so that I think it'll just increase the reality of our relationship instead of coming from this separate thing that doesn't know what he's talking about. So I think it's exciting.
Yeah, and the Gunn Theater community, I feel so honored to be able to be a part of it. Teaching theater, I mean, things come up that don't come up, as you know, in like an algebra class, and so we're already talking about more intimate topics, and so I mean, we feel very, very close to our students. Yeah. And we picked some seniors to be in the show as well, so they are graduating and going off as kind of like a last thing for Gunn Theater. Yeah.
And a bunch of other teachers that teach English and math, et cetera. And so it's this, I think, community theater in the very best sense of the word. 2 years ago, Palo Alto Players put on, and you directed, Death of a Salesman with some wonderfully admired Gunn teachers and retired teachers, and it was a wonderful production. And so this is sort of phase 2 of that. And again, talk about community theater. I mean, it's really, it's a rich community, and we're all really grateful.
Great. Well, thank you to our studio audience. Those were great questions.
Thank you.
All right. Well, this is a good segue into talking a little bit more about your roles at Gunn High School. So tell us what you do there and how the teaching and then the theater production work kind of dovetails.
Yeah.
I've been there since 1983. So a little while, and it's been my professional world, and watching students come in, and now they're old and families, and not grandparents yet, but almost, and in stage tech and all of that. I had a great student here who for 4 years was just this wonderful theater student, and she talked in her junior and senior year, I want to be a drama teacher. She said that, she knew that. And I said, awesome. I didn't quite buy it, but man,
Drama teacher.
she went and nailed it, and she's so wonderful, and she has a beautiful family here as well. And so it's talk about gratifying for a teacher. So it's really rich. And in theater, kids come because they want to do that. They can learn new skills on stage, off stage. She teaches stage tech. So there's so many places to go to use that in the world. Television.
Yeah. Great, good. So tell us about some of the productions that you've done at Gunn, and you know, I read a little bit. There were some shows with very adult themes, and how do you get the high schoolers to sort of rise to that when those roles are normally played by adults?
Yeah. We just did King Lear, which actually I was in his King Lear 22 years ago, and we decided to do it again.
She was an amazing goneril.
Oh, thank you.
Oldest daughter. Yeah.
And yeah, how do you ask? We had a high school junior play King Lear with all these struggling with getting older.
Family and this and that.
Yeah.
It's again, theater it's an opportunity for the heart and the mind to go forward. And kids, by the time they're in high school, I think at any age, but just invite them to go forward and open up their emotions and learn how to ask questions of themselves and society. You can't talk down to them. You open up and say, let's go do this. Let's read Angels in America and explore these wonderful, challenging themes that we'll do next year. You know, they surprise you constantly. We are so blessed to have great kids in our department and at Gunn. You know.
Yeah, and our your teaching is very full. We have 4 full years of different theater, and we can do something like King Lear because Jim Shelby teaches a class along with an English teacher, Paul Dunlap.
Who's
that
also
is,
in our play.
Yes, he plays the love interest that I'm going to run away with.
It's all crazy incestuous, but it's
Yeah,
okay.
right, it is okay. And they teach this Shakespeare and performance class, and they take 2 periods of the day, and they study it as English, as literature, and they study it on stage. So they were ready and hungry for King Lear.
They're hungry and
Yeah.
talented and trained so that they can like plunge into really challenging material.
Right. Oh, I want to go back to high school.
Yeah, it's great.
Go
It's
back
great.
to Gunn High School. So related to that is if you do shows like Kiss Me Kate and Anything Goes, classical musicals that might be a little
love them.
dated.
Yeah, but you know what?
I love them too.
Yeah.
But how are the high school folks with doing those?
That's
that they're
also
not-
important. We were just talking about Guys and Dolls, a classic, beautiful musical. Last year we did The Music Man, and it's just such a beautiful piece of theater, and that's also important teaching because the kids might not necessarily know that play, whereas I grew up on it. They need to know that and have that under their belt. So in a 4-year program, they get to experience challenging new pieces and really important old pieces, way old, Greeks and Shakespeare or classic musicals. There's so much to learn to appreciate.
Yeah, it's nice too because kind of passion about plays is contagious. And we did Anything Goes a few years ago. I was also in a production of Jim Shelby's of Anything Goes. So when we got to do that again, the students, they see how much we love the play and how, so many of these things of falling in love are timeless and stuff like that. So giving those to the students, and when they see our passion about it, they just light up and it's kind of contagious.
bet.
Yeah.
Do you give your students any specific advice for going out into the community and auditioning for community theater?
We publicize auditions, and there are things coming up, and Foothill College, Palo Alto Players, lots of things, open auditions, like do that. Summer programs as well, and then they go off and either stay involved in theater in college or major in it. You know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
And also just theater, whether or not you're going to be a theater practitioner,
Sure.
theater as a series of skills, how to present, how to perform, how to communicate is important for anyone. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about Palo Alto Players now.
Okay.
Kristen, you're on the board of directors.
I am on the board of directors, yes.
How long has
It's who you know.
Yes, that's right. How long has the theater company been around, and what is its continuing mission?
Oh my gosh, it's 89 years, 87 years. I think being a theater for and by the community is really important, that we have people all over Silicon Valley who, they can't afford to do theater as a living, but they possibly even studied it, but now they have a tech job at Google, and getting them to bring their talent and be able to perform at night in a community theater, there's such a wealth of artistic talent around here, and I think Palo Alto Players harvests that, and that's why it's just such a wonderful theater community to be a part of.
Okay. How do you choose your shows?
Patrick Klein is the artistic director, and so he is in charge of choosing the shows. And people who know him are always like shooting him like, oh, this show just became available, or things like that. And for Death of a Salesman and this Man Who Came to Dinner, I proposed those to him and said, hey, we could do this community production, and he was so generous to say yes to me. So it's so nice that every once in a while I'm like, well, can we do this project? And he says yes. But yeah, he's always looking at sometimes going to New York to see plays, to see like what's available, and visiting licensing houses, and seeing the Sam French catalog of what's out, and then what's pertinent to what's going on today and what we think the audiences need to see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How would you characterize your core audience members? Like your subscriber base?
Well, I think when you look at subscribers over all theaters, people who are older have time to be like, I know that I'm going to be able to see these 5 plays. I think now single subscribers are always younger people who are like, oh, it's last minute, I can go see this play. So all theater companies are working on getting that younger subscriber base.
Boy, the demographics is getting older, and
Right.
so Theater Works, or Palo Alto Players, also Theater Works, is really working on bringing in the youngsters. They have
Right.
teen nights, and they bring people in to talk to directors, and they feed our high school kids pizzas, and then they come see the play. It's really
Yeah.
great to have young kids in the play, because they will age.
Right.
Yeah, right now Palo Alto Players is doing Rock of Ages, which is
Yep.
catering to a little bit younger of an audience, so that's really nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So is Palo Alto Players considering any changes? How do you see its trajectory going, in addition to kind of trying to appeal to a younger?
Yeah. A few years ago, we had a big change of leadership. Peter Bliznick, who had been leading the company for many, many years, decided to retire. And so Patrick Klein and Elizabeth Santana came on, and they have just been amazing. They almost treated Palo Alto Players like a startup company about, like, where can we go from here? We have new leadership, new millennia, like, let's go forward and see what we can do and how we can kind of bring the younger generation into Palo Alto Players. And so now now we're on that trajectory. So we want to stay on this trajectory, because I think Palo Alto Players has just been doing really well in that sense.
We have such a rich, diverse community. I know a couple of years ago you did Chinglish, which is
Yeah.
about Chinese immigration, and in Silicon Valley and here and back in China. And then Flower Drum Song
Is next season.
Next
Yeah.
season, a new book by
David Henry
David
Wong.
Henry
Yep.
Wong with the same beautiful songs. So it's fascinating. So we have a rich, interesting audience, and I think that you're evolving
Yeah.
with them.
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we have about a minute left, so let's recap for our viewers that Palo Alto Players is presenting the comedy The Man Who Came to Dinner by Moss Hart and George S. Kaufman at the Lucy Stern Theater in Palo Alto from June 15th through July 1st. And could you tell our viewers where they can get more information about the show, like
Yes,
the URL?
at paplayers.org.
Great. Thank you. paplayers.org. Peninsula Backstage is online also. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/peninsula-backstage. Like our page if you're interested in getting updates when new episodes become available for viewing online and on the air. And once again, I'd like to thank my guests from Palo Alto Players, Jim Shelby and Kristen Lo,
Thank you
for
for
playing
having
Sheridan
us.
Whiteside and Maggie Cutler. Thank you to our studio audience for great questions. And thank you to our viewers. We appreciate your watching this episode of Peninsula Backstage. And remember to go out and support local live theater.